Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of Try Not to Curse. Sarah is back with us again. As I said in her last episode, she has been through some things, and thankfully she is open, she is honest, she is offering to share those things with us because, you know, some people, you go through some stuff and you're like, oh, I'm glad I'm over it, but I don't want to talk about it again. I don't want to bring it up again. Sarah, thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me again.
And thank you for being had. I am well. So one of the things, again, over the years, you've been very open and honest, sharing your journey, be it your healthcare, situations in your personal life, with relationships, with family, with friends, struggles just being a single mom. And again, in the last episode, we talked about, the trauma. You realized that your body was kind of fighting against you. And it turns out it was, this mental, a reaction or response to this trauma that you had experienced earlier in life. And, but while you're getting to the bottom of that, while you're going through that, while you're dealing with the roller coaster of emotion and mental toll that it takes to put yourself through something like that, your mother passes away. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say you've kind of had a tumultuous relationship with your mother over the past,
Yes.
and now you are saddled with dealing with her estate essentially, and everything that she has left behind in her stead. And so walk me through where you're at that point, with your mental health journey, where you're at in life when you suddenly lose your mother.
So the estate situation happened about 11 months after my mom passed.
Okay.
So when my mom passed away, my stepdad, her husband, was still alive. And at that point, for several years, I had pretty much created boundaries with her.
Sure. She
struggled with a lot of mental health issues. And the primary one being addiction. She had an opiate addiction. And when I discovered that it was still active is when I removed myself from my relationship with her. It was very much superficial. We would talk on the phone and things like that. But, I would not allow my daughter to go to her house. I wouldn't go to her house. I created those boundaries. Like if these things are met, if these, if you get the help that you need and whatever, like I will obviously support you. But
Sure.
If you can't, then I have to do what I have to do to protect mine.
And that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's hard because I think when we talk about addiction, a lot of times, like I love watching people's recovery journeys. I think it's incredible. And we talk about it from their perspective a lot. And a lot of times we don't talk about what happens to the people who are kind of in the wake of the addict.
Absolutely.
So my entire life has been shaped by addiction. I have never once used. I have never had an addiction. I have never had a problem with drugs. I've never done drugs. And so it's easy for me to understand from this perspective and not the other perspective. So
right.
That was what I had to do to protect my daughter because I didn't want her to go through what I went through with my mother my entire life. And so when my stepdad passed away, which was very sudden, one of the things that we discovered and we'd kind of known that was in their addictive behavior, they had people move into their house with them. Okay. These two older people, probably in their 50s, 60s, both addicts, they were fueling each other's addiction. One was the source, one, had the hookups, one had the money. So they kind of just all fed into this.
Yeah.
Kind of referred to it as a trap house, honestly, because that's what it felt like. And it was crazy. Like the amount of things that I discovered after the fact was a lot. But it all started when they let these people move in with them, like right before COVID.
Okay.
So this was like 2019 when this happened. My mom had been ill for a while. They needed some help. They figured, okay, we'll give you guys reduced rent. You can rent out a room in our basement and just, help with cleaning, help with changing out the water bottles in the Culligan cooler, like all those kinds of things, which, none of was actually happening. It was just kind of a, whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we didn't have real confirmation of that probably until they died, was that these people were still there. I had spoken with my mother, who was desperately trying to get them out of the house, and was having no luck. My stepfather was very much a pushover in the best form of the word. He was very much like, oh, I feel bad. Like I'm trying to give them a chance. But I think it was almost like a companionship thing. Like he felt like in this own twisted way, they were all friends, and maybe they were in some way. I don't know. But yeah, when they died, I had a hell of a time trying to get them out of my house.
So, and now again, so you knew obviously before your mom had passed that they were there, that like you said, she was trying to get them out, but she wasn't really sure what legal recourse she had, or again, your stepfather was just kind of saying like, oh, just brush it off, like just ignore them.
Yeah.
It's, they're still serving a purpose. It's fine. We're helping them out. So now both have passed. So you take over the estate. You've got ownership of the home, and still they're like, nope, we're not, and again, I people hear these stories. I mean, they were essentially squatting, and people hear these stories, but from what you see, the number one thing that I see constantly is that the laws are different state to state in situations like this. So when it came time for you to take control of everything, did you know them? Did you meet them? Did you have a conversation with them directly and say, okay, this is the situation. They're gone. You need to be gone as well. How did all of that transpire?
Yeah, so I had never met these people. I didn't know what their names were. My mom gave me fake names, so I couldn't even.
Oh, wow.
She was so secretive about it when she was still alive. Because one of the things was my mom was very narcissistic, and I could see through it. I did not wear rose-colored glasses, so she couldn't lie to me. Like she knew exactly why I was asking the questions I was asking. Like, who are these people? What are you guys doing? Whatever. Very secretive, never knew their names until they died. I go to the house the day I find out my stepdad dies, which I found out on Facebook of all things. There was like sirens going up the hill, and somebody reported it, of course, being nosy on Facebook. And I had a really bad feeling in my stomach and had my husband drive over to the house. And sure enough, it was their house. So it was very odd timing. So I run up to the house as soon as everything happens, and I meet the police, I meet the coroner, they come and take his body. And then I go inside, I meet these people, and I'm like, all right, I need to get some things in order. We had conversations in the past. Like, I knew he wanted me to take care of his estate when anything happened to him. But we hadn't had the real conversation yet because we weren't expecting it to happen yet. We had some health issues, but, so, I got some paperwork and stuff. We went down and kind of started talking to them, and they were like, okay, well, what about us? I'm like, respectfully, you're not my problem. You guys are going to have to figure it out, and we couldn't find his car keys when he died. And it was very weird. So it just a bunch of like red flags were going off. And I'm like, okay, we can't find his car keys. We can't find his wallet. We can't find anything.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, like, you guys are going to need to figure it out. You're two grown ass people. The people who own the house are no longer here. This house will basically go into my name at this point. You need to figure it out. And this woman starts like, well, we have rights. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm angry, obviously. I just lost both of my parents in very, very like traumatic fashions. The last thing I'm doing is worrying about this woman in my parents' basement. So I'm just like, I walked away. I walked out of the room, and I was just like, I'm gonna lose it on these people. Like, no. And I know I can't reason with them because they're two drug addicts. So it's like frustrating.
Well, and again, you're, like you said, you're also going through your own mental and emotional journey. You're processing a lot of things as well. You're just at a heightened raw emotional state. And now you have this major thing just drop on you. Right.
Exactly. And it was like, we couldn't catch a break for years straight. It was crazy. But anyway, so we end up leaving the house. I'm like, okay, because my parents' dogs were still there. My parents had two dogs. And I was like, okay, we'll be back to check on some things. I need to still go through the house, but I kind of need to process things. And, we'll come in and check on the house, but you guys really need to figure it out. Like, I don't know if you need to call social services or something, but like this house is going to get cleaned out and sold. The house was in complete disarray. It was disgusting. They had let the house go to shit.
Yeah.
I mean, like there were animal feces everywhere. There was rotting food. There were bugs. I mean, it looked like it should have been condemned.
That's awful.
And these people were supposed to be taking care of the house for my parents, quote unquote. And it was stuff of nightmare fuel, like walking in there, like my feet stuck to the floor. We had to wear masks, like this, it was crazy. So, I called lawyers and I called, places, and I called Eversource, and I called all of the places I could think of, like, okay, my parents died. There are people living in the house. Do not allow them to establish any sort of utilities in their name. And they're like, well, we can't do that.
Right.
I'm like, so you can call your neighbor, like on your neighbor's behalf tomorrow, and you can put your name on their electric, and they don't check anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I called the internet company, and I said the same thing, like, just keep it open, please. Please do not allow anything else to be installed here. They're like, oh, well, if somebody calls, I'm like, you don't ask for a mortgage or a deed or a lease agreement or anything. They're like, no. And I was like, how does that make sense?
Right.
Like, it's so crazy to me that anybody can call anywhere to establish residency, and there's no checks and balances for it.
And I mean, I understand it because, a lot of people, will open accounts on behalf of someone else, like a guardianship, a parent with, their child moving into their first apartment or in college or something like that. But again, to your point, proof of ownership, proof of address. I mean, gosh, I just went and got my real ID updated at the DMV, and I needed 11 different pieces of paperwork. So, so I mean,
and a blood sample, like,
right?
Seriously.
Yeah, right. and so the fact that, and granted, these companies, the bottom line is all they care about is getting paid. If they don't get paid, then Lord knows you're hearing from them. But the fact that, like, I want you to pay for a service for an established residence, and you're just like, yep, sounds good. Like, at any old there's, and the fact that, and it's been going on for so long as well. Like, it's pretty much been this way since the beginning. And the fact that none of the states are like, maybe you should do a little more due diligence. Maybe you should have some checks and balances. And like, I don't understand how they continue to get away with this, but so, okay. So you're getting no help from the utilities.
Nope. Lawyers pretty much tell me, you're going to have to start the eviction process. I'm like, great. I don't know what that's going to cost. I don't know, at this point, I'm trying to still figure out everything with, his financial situation and, his bank account information, all that stuff. All of it was new.
So he had no other next of kin, no other relatives like this. Now this solely fell on you as well.
So he had asked me to do it.
Okay.
He was like, I don't trust, before he died, he's like, I don't trust anybody else to take care of this. Like, I know that you'll do anything that you need to do.
And nobody challenged you on that either? No one came out of the woodwork and said, hey, I have rights. And
I mean, I have a brother who's also his stepson, and then I have a half brother who is his actual son. And we were all on the same page. I'm like, listen, like, I know what he wanted. We'll all agree on everything, basically, but because until I can find the will, this was the thing. When I find the will, we'll go through the will, and we'll do all of that.
In the meantime, you guys have made this agreement that, okay, Sarah, well, at least you understand his wishes, and so you're going to kind of take the lead on managing everything and closing all the accounts and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So I had his cell phone. I was able to get into his cell phone.
Good.
I had the passwords to his accounts. I was able to go to the bank. I filed things with the court, as the executor. They granted me access to things. So all of that was pretty easy because I knew what he wanted. Sure. It was just a matter of, I got to find this will. We went through the house. We went through his safe. His safe had been emptied. Couldn't find anything. And I was preparing for a big work trip the following week, like trying to, I'm like, okay, I need to kind of step away from the house for like a day or two. I need to get ready for my trip. I'll come back when I'm back, I'll come back to the house. I'll go through every single piece of paper that I didn't get to yet, because I had stacks of papers, brought
Sure.
back to my house and stuff, but I couldn't find the will. And so on my way to California, I'm on a plane, 6:00 flight to San Francisco. I'm about to land and I'm getting text messages from my husband. Did you land yet? Did you land yet? I don't see that you landed. Where are you?
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, we're circling the airport. Why? He's like, okay, well, I don't want to upset you. Just call me when you land. I'm like, can you please tell me what's the matter? Like, what happened? He's like, your parents' house is on fire.
Great.
So it's probably 2 weeks after the fact. And I was like, what do you mean the house is on fire? Like, I can't call him because I'm in the air still.
Right.
I'm texting people I know who are in the area. He's, I think my daughter was at school. My daughter was at school. He was fishing or something. He's like, I'm an hour away from the house. So I'm texting my brother. I'm texting my friends like, hey, if you're in the area, can you just swing by my parents' house and see what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm like, they need to be investigated. Like, I feel like these people did something, freaking out. Come to find out, his office, where all of the paperwork that I needed to do my job burnt to a crisp.
Oh my
entire
gosh.
office.
Not suspicious at all.
Not suspicious.
At all.
So I was like, they need to investigate it. They investigated it. And it was not arson. It was an electrical fire that happened from an extension cord that was under his desk.
Well.
However, so I think I'm up Schitt's Creek with no paddle. However, the fire marshal comes and you know what he does? He condemns the house.
There you go.
They have to get out.
Oh, well, too bad, so sad.
So it was rough because, they ended up saying like, you need to leave. They were allowed to take some things out and leave. But after that, it was like, okay, now I have to deal with rebuilding a house on top of everything.
Yeah.
But they broke back into the house. We had changed the locks and everything, and they broke back in. I called the police. The police said they wouldn't do anything.
What?
Oh yeah, they said because I was like, no, they didn't have a key. We changed the locks. They did not have a key. And the cops wouldn't do anything. The police, they came, they saw that they had broken down the door. They saw everything. And they were like, well, we can't really press charges because they were legally allowed to be here. I'm like, technically they weren't. The house was condemned.
Well, and talk about property damage. I mean, literally, they're not going to place any type of charges on these people?
They wouldn't do anything.
Oh my gosh, that's frustrating.
Yep. And then when I asked, being, a smart ass, and I'm like, okay, so if they come back on the property, am I allowed to use my Second Amendment right to protect the property? And they're like, wait, you can't say that. I'm like, I'm asking a question. Like, I mean, your rules seem twisted here. So I'm just asking, like, just put it out there,
Right. If it's a free for all, what can I do? Right.
So basically, if they break into your house because they stayed there at one point, it's totally fine. So just be mindful of that in the future.
You guys, it's like that rule with the vampires. Once you allow them in, gang. Shit, I didn't know the law was on the vampire side, but okay, now we know. Damn.
It's crazy because so my parents had 2 dogs. These people were not taking care of them. We called animal welfare in town. They refused to take the dogs because there were 2 adults living in the house. We couldn't take them because we don't have space for them in my home.
Right.
And it was like an argument with animal welfare, like these dogs need to be surrendered. They are not being taken care of. They're basically being neglected in this home.
Right.
I was having to DoorDash these people food for the dogs because they were asking for money for the dogs. So I was sending food instead so that at least the dogs were eating.
Right.
Yeah, like it was like everywhere we turned, nobody would actually help us.
Which and again, the double standard, because meanwhile, if I were to go adopt a pet from animal welfare, I have to fill out an application. I have to pay a fee. In some instances, they might do a home visit to make sure that everything's on the up and up, that the home is safe for the animal, very much like you would when you're adopting a child. And yet you're telling them this is the situation. These are the circumstances these animals are living under. And all they can say is, there are 2 quote unquote responsible adults in the home. So it's fine.
Right.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
And they tried to make it our fault too. They were getting upset with my husband because we wouldn't take them. And I'm like, we have a dog. We have 3 cats. We have a very small house. Yeah. I could not take like a 200-pound sheepdog and a Bichon Frise. Like it's not happening. I'm not causing chaos in my own house
Yeah.
for these dogs. Like, these are why these services and places exist. Like, the owners died.
Right. Right.
You know, it's not like they just, like, they died. What else would you do if there were two people not living in the house? Would you take them?
That's unbelievable.
So it was crazy. It was a really interesting series of events.
But I mean, and you're just not getting support on any level from anyone. That's just unbelievable.
Yep. I hired an attorney for the estate. I had one meeting with him. I sent him documentation, and then he completely ghosted me.
Great.
So I ended up doing everything myself, and it was like, oh my God, this is it was such a huge lesson for me. You know, what to do for myself, what to do for my family, what to do. But it was just like one series of things after the other that you don't expect to happen.
Well, because
you're just like not aware of.
Well, because none of it makes sense. Like no rational human being would think, I am in this situation, so of course I'm going to go to the authorities. I'm trying to do you're doing all of the right things. It's not as if you're just going rogue and you're just winging it. You're going to these people who are supposed to understand the law, who are supposed to protect you, who are supposed to have, you know, things in place in which to handle situations like this, and they're all throwing their hands up and saying, "There's not a thing I can do for you." And it's like, but hold on, like hold on, because I pay taxes. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm doing all of the right things. You know, movies and TV shows you guys keep trying to tell us that you're the last stand, that you're going to protect us. You're here to do a service, and instead they're just like, psh, sucks to be you. Like what? Yep.
So we actually called a wellness check on my mother the day before she died.
Oh, wow.
Because we had spoken to her on the phone. She sounded like she was having a stroke. She sounded very weird. She was actively overdosing. Ugh. And so we called a wellness check. The ambulance and the police both came. They said, oh, yeah, no, she's coherent. Everything is fine. But she doesn't want to come with us. So they left her there.
Oh, my God.
And then I demanded the reports after the fact because I saw her in the hospital before she died. And there is no way any sort of trained medical professional or any sort of emergency responder would have ever thought that that woman was safe. I mean, she was living in a house with my stepdad was still alive, 3 people at the time. Able-bodied. She was in filth. She was completely she was actively overdosing and had like an active infection from a dirty needle, which is what killed her.
Oh my God.
And they just walked in. They saw her. They saw the state that she was in. She couldn't even walk. And we're like, yep, she's fine. There's nothing we can do. And then left. It's because they don't want to.
They just didn't want to deal with it. Yeah.
They didn't want to do anything.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
So it's like, and so I demanded the reports. I'm like, I saw the woman. I saw her, 8 hours before she died after surgery. I know that she wasn't coherent. I spoke with her on the phone. I knew she wasn't coherent.
Right.
And the only reason I knew was because my sister-in-law had called and she called me and she's like, something's wrong with your mom. And I was like, okay, let's figure it out. But she wouldn't let anybody come to the house. She would, my brother drove to the house and stood outside the door. She wouldn't let anybody in. So it was she clearly wasn't well. The problem was she'd gone septic. And so she wasn't coherent. She wasn't, she didn't know who anybody was. So it's interesting. We put a lot of faith in these services that we pay.
Well, because society tells us that they're going to be there for us. Mm-hmm. That's when growing up, that's all. Oh, go to a police officer, make sure you tell, that's crazy. That's just crazy.
Yep.
And again, you're in the middle of your own mental health, physical health, trying to get your life on track, going through all of this. And I'm sure I can't even imagine. And again, working a full-time job, you have a family at home that you're trying to take care of. You've got a daughter that's going to school. Again, like you said, you have your own pets. It just everything that anybody deals with on a regular basis, you're now dealing with it times 10. And you have, you're emotionally drained, you're mentally drained. And at the end of the day, there's no one to reach out to. There's no one to lean on. There's no one that can offer you any type of support or optimism. And so Jesus, and I feel like, again, even though I said in the beginning, all of the states have different laws, it seems as though this is a pattern that repeats over and over again. The number one thing I always read is that squatters have more rights than the owners of the homes. That
they do.
And I understand it to a point of, trying to keep people off the streets and trying to keep people safe in that regard. But they have to understand that every circumstance is different. And it's not simply a matter of somebody, fearing for their lives on the streets, going and seeing a home that's abandoned and saying, at least I've got a roof over my head. That's why I'm here. Like these people were just completely taking advantage of the situation and then of you ultimately. And the law was allowing it, essentially.
Oh, absolutely. Ugh. And it put me in a weird position because, okay, I'm coming into the situation. They already know that I haven't spoken really with my parents.
Right.
After my mom died, I was a little bit more communicative with my stepdad because he was mourning my mother and dealing with that. But I also knew that there were still, things going on in the house that perhaps I didn't want to be aware of. So I stayed away from the house. Like I didn't do any of that, but they also knew that I wasn't stupid. And so I had a conversation with the male while we were there. And he said he was talking about something. I was like, yeah, it was great when they were all sober, but you wouldn't know that.
Wow. And
he looked at me like with this dead glare, like, oh, like, of course I know. I'm not stupid. I know exactly what's been going on in the house. Nobody normal lives like this.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right. No,
like this isn't normal.
Yeah.
It was disgusting. Like these two people should be ashamed of themselves. Like, I don't know.
Addiction will do that to you,
And I don't know, perhaps they weren't using. I have no idea. I can go off of what I can see and what I assume, but I mean, they were selling my parents' jewelry. There were pieces of my family history that are gone because of these people. They came in and stole it after the fact.
Yeah.
They stole things from me in that house when they came back, and the cops were still like, oh, sorry, we have no proof that it was yours. I'm like, are you goddamn kidding? Like,
wow,
this home has been in my family for 25 years.
Right.
Like, are you serious?
Right.
It's like these people who have contributed absolutely nothing have somehow gotten more rights. And I totally agree with your point. Like sometimes there is that level of protection for people, especially people who are struggling with homelessness and things like that, but it's not the same thing in my opinion.
Like, not. Absolutely not.
So, I mean, we'll get evicted if we're renting, we'll get the notice on our door. They won't hesitate to kick us out. What's the difference between renting from a corporation and then squatting in somebody's house?
Right. And there shouldn't
be. What's the difference?
Right. Absolutely.
There shouldn't be. It's just money.
Right. Well, and they're both private properties, right? It's just a matter of I don't know who has the legal, like you said, the money to really do some damage legally and go after the police force and put some muscle behind their claims. But it's like, again, at the end of the day, we're taxpayers. We pay for this service, and the fact that you're looking at us and again, just it comes down to laziness too. It's like, we don't want to deal with that mess. Ew, like gross. I don't want that in the back of my squad car. I don't want to have they're whatever. They're just going to end up back there anyway. What are all the myriad of excuses that go with it? Oh my God.
And I have to wonder sometimes too about the situation, especially when they went to do the wellness check. There were two, technically, my parents are considered seniors. They were over 65. Mm-hmm. They were both 65 when they died, actually. And there were these people clearly abusing them. Like, my mom was clearly not being taken care of. There was some sort of, neglect happening in that house. And you would think as mandated reporters that something would happen,
especially if they were sent there specifically to check on someone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I have to wonder what that actually looks like when those kind of calls come in, or when they actually do feel empowered to make that judgment call. Is it just they pick and choose?
Right.
do we have to worry about when we get older if something, God forbid, happens to us? Or,
Well,
it's scary.
Well, and again, it varies by state to state, right? So I have a friend whose mother had passed away. And again, they were in constant contact with her, talked to her all the time, in the morning, checking in the evening, how was your day, that kind of thing. Couldn't reach her, right? Couldn't reach her all day. Couldn't reach her. Asked the cops, this was in Queens, New York. Asked the cops, please go do a wellness check. Oh, well, nobody answered the door. So, nobody answered. And they're like, that's the point of the wellness check. If we can't reach her and she's not coming to the door, then break down the fucking door. Like that's what we're asking you to do. And well, nope, it was fine. So they had to go there themselves, and sure as shit, their mother was dead in the bathroom, had like a heart attack or something. But then even then, I want to say it was like the afternoon, the coroner didn't finally come and take the body until like 3:00 in the morning. So this poor woman is just dead in her house for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours before anybody even, puts a blanket over her, puts her in a body. It's just why is this an acceptable practice in what we consider the most civilized society, the most powerful country in the world? And this is how we treat our citizens. This is how we treat our deceased citizens. It's fucked, and it's so upsetting. And again, so they have already condemned the house and said it's not livable. And yet the cops are like, well, they were here before, they can stay. Well, hold on. Legally, no one should be here. It's not, again, this is the whole, even at the very least, it's the base, the foundation of health and safety. Like, so it's not safe for them to be here. So you can't let them be here. Well, meh.
Yeah,
What?
pretty much.
What?
I'm like, yeah, we changed. As soon as that happened, my brother went to the store. He came back with locks, and he changed the locks. Because at that point, they had tried to take my stepfather's car, which we had to disable.
Miraculously found the keys.
Yep, they were miraculously. Oh yeah, these were in my pocket. Yep, I'm sure they were. That's fine. But we had disabled the car because it was a hybrid, so we removed part of the system so that it wouldn't turn on, even if they had the key.
Good.
My husband's a genius, apparently. And so all of a sudden, when they're like, "Oh yeah, we think there's something wrong with the car," we tried to take it to the store to get some food, and it wouldn't start. We're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, I'll get it towed and look into it." And we just popped the thing in and like drove it to my house. So I was basically like, I had to steal on top of it. I had to steal my own stepfather's car.
Yeah.
So that these people wouldn't just help themselves to it. And it was like the entitlement of these two was insane. But then on top of it, everything with the fire, it was like, they just helped them. They literally broke the door down. So I had gone over to check on something. I think I'd go to check on the basement when we'd have like heavy rains. And I'm like, oh crap, there's no, there's no electricity, nothing, no air flowing through, nothing. And so the sump pump obviously couldn't turn on. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go check the basement. I go to open the door, and the door's open already. And I was like, uh-oh. And I'm freaking out because I've watched way too many episodes of SVU. I'm just like, okay.
Oh, 100%.
So I like open the door, and I'm kind of looking around. So I end up just calling the police. They go in and check. They're like, oh yeah, this room's cleared out. This room's cleared out. And I was like, yeah, they didn't have permission to do any of that. Like, they took stuff that belonged to me.
Right.
And nothing happened. I got them on the phone. I called the woman. I was like, did you guys come to the house? Oh yeah. But no, he didn't break the door down. He used his key. I'm like, that's weird because the key doesn't work.
Right.
It's a different lock.
Right.
So they admitted to it in front of the police officer. Like, yep, we came. Yes, we took our stuff. Yes, whatever. And the cop was like, well, I can't do anything.
Oh, I don't understand.
Like,
I don't understand.
This is why there's such a distrust.
100%.
Especially like our generation.
Yes.
We're experiencing this new age of policing, I feel like. And I get it to some degree, but at the same time, it was like, there was literally a crime. Like, there was a breaking and entering. Like, you had to break down the door. Clearly, you were not legally able to get in there.
Right.
And it wasn't their property. So once they left, they were gone. That was no longer their residence. They had already established residency elsewhere.
I mean, it's amazing that crimes get solved at all with this level of just pure, just laziness and just dismissive attitude. Like, oh, well, you know, we can't prove. Well, that's why I called you. That's why you're here. That's your job, actually, is to find proof, to you know, here's the evidence. Now do the due diligence of your job. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. So, and I had found out more about these two individuals, you know, through the grapevine and like knowing some members of their family. And this wasn't the first time that this happened.
Sure. So there's a record of them doing this.
Yeah. And, you know, sob stories and putting things on the internet about this illness and that illness and all this other stuff. And like all of those things may be true. I don't know. But I just know the reality of the situation I dealt with them, and it was not fun. I really thought for the longest time that they were going to think I burned the house down because I wanted to get them out so bad. But I was like, nope, that was all God. I swear to God, God came down himself and he lit that fire because there was no other way to get these people out.
Was trying to help you out. Yeah.
Like legit. So I was freaking out until they came back with the report. And I was like, okay, good. Because I was on the other side of the country. I'm just saying, like, I didn't do anything. But
so ultimately, these people just chose to up and leave. Again, granted, after ransacking the place, but they finally left. They did leave on their own accord.
I mean, they had to.
Yeah.
Because the house got condemned.
Right.
So the fire marshal had to stay there and wait until somebody left with them. They would not allow them to stay on the property.
Okay.
And they only came back to get their stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, your stuff. Yeah. Jesus.
A mixture of stuff. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, well, okay. So, you know, I talk about this a lot, and I try to bring this up with my mother, and I understand that, you know, people don't want to talk about end of life. They don't want to talk about, you know, once they're gone, they don't want to think about it in those terms, but not being able to find a will, you know, how I know you said that was probably the easier part, but I still feel like it's not that easy to just simply say, hey, they died. I'm the only one taking control of stuff. I mean, what did you have to go through, you know, just legally, red tape, documentation? What kind of bullshit did you have to go through, you know, just to establish that, hey, I'm taking ownership now of their estate? Yeah.
So I mean, we had the open conversation as a family. Everybody was totally fine with me, you know, taking care of it. So I had to petition the probate court in Milford, you know, hey, I had to provide them like the death certificate and like my relationship. They will contact all, you know, next of kin because we couldn't find a will. It's something called intestate, where it goes based on the next of kin. So there would be a spouse, and if there's no surviving spouse, then it would go to like the next child, whatever.
Okay.
So we agreed as a family, like I would take over as executor. I would get all the stuff in order. I would, you know, basically like make sure all the bills got paid and see what was, you know, what to do with the house and everything. And then we would kind of decide together how we were going to, if there was anything, which at the time I'm like, I don't think there is going to be anything, like we'll separate it and divided among, you know, the five of us, including my daughter and my niece.
Yeah.
Because my stepdad's biggest wishes were to send the kids to college. Like, he's like, I don't have much. But if, you know, he had a little bit of like a very small amount from my mom when she passed away, because he had life insurance on her. You know, I'd like to give that to the girls, maybe just for, you know, to help them with college or whatever.
Yeah.
So once I had to petition the court, I had to wait for the, basically like the approval. They give me the documents. Then I'm able to go to the banks, and I'm able to go to the life insurance, and I'm able to go to, like I had to call his work and, you know, provide them all of these copies of the death certificate. And then my paperwork saying like, okay, she's authorized to speak on behalf of the estate. I do get permission to access financials and access those kinds of things. Because I was a fiduciary too. So I was taking care of the financial part as well as, you know, like making sure everything was distributed and all that stuff. So it was a journey, especially never doing it before and kind of flying blind with no will, you know.
Sure.
I had to kind of put myself into his head as much as I could and be like, what would he want? So I went through dozens of pages of text messages between me and him. I went through his phone, his emails, and it's invasive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned from this process, and I want to really kind of nail into other people, is you never know when it's your time.
Yeah.
Be prepared. All of my accounts have a beneficiary on it. I have a will.
Yep.
Even if you don't think you have enough to warrant it, even put a beneficiary.
Yeah.
If something happens to that beneficiary, update it. The littlest things can help whoever is stuck picking up your mess.
Yeah. I've said that myself because, again, just through hearing various stories and having that base understanding that all states are different. So, you hear a story here and you're like, I wonder if it's the same here in Connecticut. So a lot of people don't know, your bank account, your savings account in particular, if you don't have any name attached to that savings account, the bank just owns it. No wonder these banks are doing so well, because if your name is not attached to the account and you say, oh, so-and-so passed away. All right, well, sounds good. Thanks for, I guess we're going to hold on to the funds in this. Wait, hold on. What? You have to go through so much legal bullshit just to, get a couple $100, from your beloved one's account. So, these are the kinds of things that I've been learning. So and all you have to do is fill out a simple form at the bank, just attach somebody else's name to it and say, hey, they are granted access on, once I die, something like that. But again, I keep... Joanne, are you listening? I keep going to my mom and I keep saying, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And I understand. And we talked about this, with Caitlin too. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. It's so easy to just get hung up in the paperwork, in the learning the terminology, just the avalanche of documentation you have to go through. But if you can just at least get that base understanding and just kind of slowly check things off the list, okay, I've attached them to this account. I not jokingly, but I said to my mom one day, I was like, listen, when you die, I'm just going to have to go through your wallet and hope that you've got a card for every account. You know what I mean? I don't know who to call. I don't know where you primarily bank from. I don't know a lot of these important things that are going to come up at some point. Who do I alert? What's the name of your primary care? I don't know who I'm supposed to be reaching out to. Mm-hmm. So, it's again, as much of it's well, and it's not even that it's an icky conversation. It's just been made to be so taboo in this society that don't talk like that. Oh, I don't want to think about that. Well, bitch, you can get hit by a bus tomorrow. So you might want to have something in place. But again, like you said, at the same time, the banks, the accounts, the state, the government make it so difficult as well. So it's also, not only is it a hard conversation, but it can be a complicated conversation.
Yeah, you definitely have to know.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start with this. If you can afford a lawyer, get one.
Yeah.
Do it before you're sick. Do it before you're old.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Well,
get a lawyer, write up a will.
Yeah. And as much as you were looking for that will, even the will isn't everybody, and again, through media, through books, movies, TV, we're told that the will is the end all be all. Well, it turns out it's not, and it can be contested quite easily. Mm-hmm. So, there are different things you can do. I was talking with my cousins about it the other day, and they're like, everything should be put in a trust, put it in a trust and do da-da-da-da. So but again, state to state, it's very different. Laws are very different in that regard. I constantly am reading, the Moneyist or the Money Quest. I think it's the Moneyist. And he talks about, if you're getting divorced in this state, these are your rights. But if you're getting divorced in that state, it's different. So it's you have to understand the laws. You have to understand, especially if you don't live in the same state, what the rights are, what you have to do. But it's so much. Oh my God, it's so, and again, to really drive the point home, you yourself are going through this this trauma, this, your therapy and trying to get yourself better, trying to get yourself in a stable place, trying to feel better physically and mentally. And then you're hit with all of this. I mean, how many years of this was, from start to finish of finally, getting the house, getting these people out of there. I know then you renovated the house, you ultimately sold the house, but how long did all of that take once your stepfather passed?
I want to say it was a little over 500 days, I think.
So almost 2 years.
Yeah, it was, I think I wrote something, it was like stupid a while ago. It was like exactly 500 and some odd days. But yeah, it was from May of 2023, he died. And then I sold the house officially just this past January.
Wow.
So, the rebuild took about 8 months altogether. And, it had to be rebuilt top to bottom.
Well, and again, who's paying for that? Like, who's...
Well, I'm telling you this. So this story, it sounds horrible and sad and very stressful, but it also really helped me with my own faith. Because it seemed that everything fell apart and then fell together. So the insurance company that I'm supposed to trust to do the right thing and to come out and give me what I need.
That you're paying. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, that technically my stepdad was paying, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
So they come out, they do the initial assessment. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll send out one of our contractors, and they'll give you, an idea of like what it's going to cost to fix the house. And I was like, okay, great. So they come out and they write me 3 different proposals. One of them is if I decide that I want to go into business with them, they can fix the house. This is what my investment would cost. And then we split the profits. The second one was they can just buy the house from me, and this is how much they'll charge me to fix it, which was a different price. Or 3, we don't go into any sort of shared business at all, and I just pay for them to fix it and move on with my day. And I'm like, you can get the fuck out of my house now.
What a scamboni. It was fucked.
It was fucked. And I was looking at this guy like, are you so yeah. So I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. So I call the insurance guy. I'm like, I don't know what you sent me, but I'm not working with them. I'm sorry. Like, that was bullshit. And like, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. That doesn't sound right. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, it's one of your people. Like,
right.
What do you mean?
You sent him here. Yeah.
So then I call a second company to come out. They come out, they do a walkthrough. They're like, yep, we're going to come out one more time. We'll do another walkthrough. We'll get measurements and an estimate, whatever. They ghost me completely. I'm waiting. I'm emailing this guy. He's like, oh, yeah, sorry. We'll get back to you, whatever. I'm dealing with the insurance. They're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do until we get the estimate. Okay, great. And then nobody answered me until I think probably like 2 or 3 months. So at that point, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I call a third contractor and I was like, listen, I don't have time to like do any of this. This is what they told me they can cover. The guy comes out. He looks at it. He's like, oh, I know what they did. They saw a woman that was upset and thought, hey, I'll just throw some dollars at her and she'll go away. He's like, do you mind if I give them a call for you? And I was like, by all means, go ahead. So this angel of a man takes my information, calls the insurance company. He's like, basically like, what the hell are you guys thinking? There's no way you're going to fix this house. I think they were saying like, oh, we could do it for $50,000.
Oh
like,
my God,
ridiculous.
Please.
And he's like, you guys have let this house sit. This house needs so much repair. It's not even funny. This house has had water damage now. Now there's mold. Like, there's all these issues from the fire that now have seeped into the rest of the house. And he's like, she's paying for that? You guys are out of your mind.
Right.
So they write up a big proposal. They submit it to the insurance company. The insurance company approves it. And they had to pay for the entire rebuild. Wow. I had to invest a little bit of money for things that weren't affected by the fire. Like, I wanted them to redo the front steps and a new roof and siding and like things like that, just to gussy it up. So it's basically a brand new house.
Sure.
And it was beautiful when it was done. It was gorgeous. But it took months of like me playing like, I'm just like, this man. It was funny because I knew the guy who came out, the second contractor that came out. he's like, oh, this is going to be a great project. And then like completely disappeared. And it's like, you guys have a check sitting at like, this isn't a check that's going to bounce.
Right. Right.
So I don't really know why they never got back to me.
Did you have to pay them for the estimate?
No.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I've heard of that before where they basically just jump from estimate to estimate just to get a little bit of a check and not have to actually do any real work. But that's, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, it was very weird. But the third company, the last company, they did an amazing job. They dealt with me for a very long, like 8 months and were absolute angels to work with. JP McGuire and Waterbury, if anybody ever needs a restoration, they're fantastic. But they built a brand new house basically for me. Like they stripped it down to the studs, like all new everything.
But again, and it sucks to say, but he hit the nail right on the head. He was like, oh, they're bullshitting you because you're a woman and they know they can get away with it.
Yep.
And because they think you're too dumb to go any further, to get a second, third, fourth opinion.
Yep.
I swear.
He knew. He knew. And he was like, he was really upset. He got very upset about it because he kind of heard the whole story and, we ended up talking. And obviously, like, I'm at the job site at least twice a week at this point, like going and seeing the project manager and all the guys. And, we built a relationship and he kind of got to know about my parents and the whole situation. So it was kind of like a labor of love for them too, a little bit, I think. But the whole process, as tragic as it all sounds, it was so healing for me because it was no longer the house that held my secrets. It was no longer the house that killed my parents. It became this beautiful, like, piece of art that I got to curate the entire thing. Like everything down to this, like the staining in the wood and, the countertops and the marble in the bath, like everything.
Yeah.
I went through my mom's Pinterest and like found ideas for like things that she liked, but, updated them a little bit. And
right.
Trying to make it like an ode to them in their, I guess, healthy era, like I try to think of them now, like, they're both whole and they're both out of pain and they're both not dealing with the things they're dealing with. So it's kind of like a nice farewell to them to like give them that house that they always want. My stepdad was actually actively trying to retire. So he was going to redo the house and sell it. And I found all the documentation after he died. So it was like, all right, I got to do this right,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was wild. It was a wild ride. And I think that, after my mom died with everything that happened, that's when I got diagnosed with complex PTSD, was after she died. And so then all of this on top of it, it was like, I've made my therapist a very wealthy woman, I'm sure. But I think had I not built that foundation, I would not have been prepared to handle any of that. I mean, I was getting my master's at the time. I started my doctorate. I was, rebuilding a house, dealing with like mourning my parents. And it was like, when everything settled, I called my boss. I'm like, I'm taking the day off. I just need to just chill today. Like, I needed to bed rot just for a day. Just like, I don't want to think, like, I wasn't running and, signing a check for a contractor or doing something with my stepdad's estate. Like it was a full-time job on top of having a full-time job. It was crazy. But again, lack of preparation, like he didn't obviously plan for it. And it's like, you would think like the man was brilliant. He had an amazing career and, had investments and like all of these things that you would think you'd have all of those, but all of his beneficiaries were listed as my mom.
Yep.
So when she died, he removed her and then there was nothing. So it was like, I had to call every account. Hey, I have the death certificate. I've got the, the paperwork from probate. Okay, great. Then they put everything into the name of the estate. So it goes to the estate if you do not have a beneficiary. So it will end up paying your bills. So if you want your money to go to whoever, make sure you have a beneficiary. Otherwise, it's going to pay your bills.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. Yeah. I had a coworker who had passed away years ago and he was single. He had no children. His parents had passed. And unfortunately, it got pretty ugly between his siblings who were trying to, help themselves and take over his estate, his accounts. And it's, it's one of those, you're mourning a loved one, and for some reason it turns into World War III amongst the family members. And it's like, that's not what this person wanted. And B, of course, like you said, nobody expects to go tomorrow. So why think about it today? But it just,
you have to.
And it just turns things so ugly. And it makes me so sad when I hear stories like that, because you're thinking like, geez, like that's certainly not what that person wanted. And now, now it's pitted family member against family member. And it's just, it's sad at the end of the day. It's ultimately just so sad. But, and again, I understand that these are not things people want to discuss. People don't want to think about. But you have to, especially if you don't live in the same state, especially if, in your case, maybe you don't have the closest connection, maybe, like thankfully, at least, he had conversations with you. So you kind of had an idea of what his wishes were. But, I had a friend who, her uncle lived in a completely different state. Her mother and he didn't really speak that much, especially as they got older. Then her mother had passed away. Then he had passed away. And then his wife had passed away. So the wife called and said, yes, he has passed. Oh, okay. That's a shame. Thanks for letting us know, so sorry. But then she had passed and no one reached out to them, didn't know anything. And of course, there are all sorts of companies out there, and you don't learn this until you get in this situation. So sure enough, some legal finance or something company called her and her sister and said, hey, there's some funds lying around under their names, and they have no children. They don't have any next of kin. It's just you. You didn't know that this woman had passed away, and you also didn't know, same thing. They didn't have a will. They didn't have anything, set up dedicated to go to anybody. So like you said, the estate paid the bills, and then whatever was left over, this company said, hey, we can rectify this for you. We can manage it. We'll send out all the paperwork for you to sign. Of course, we're going to get a cut of it. But if that's what you want. So yes, in the end, they did get some of that money back from his estate. But when you don't even know what's out there, when you don't even know that you have a connection to someone who has now passed, it's wild. All the, and again, it's, I guess in one way, it's nice that these companies exist, that they're sort of providing a service, even though it's icky because they're providing it only so they can get a cut of it, a piece of it. But it's just a lot. It's a lot to understand. It's a lot to navigate. And again, it all varies state to state as well. So it's all just so, and again, I understand why people don't want to deal with it, because it's overwhelming.
It is.
But again, in your situation, it came when you least expected it. Both, your mother, unfortunately, you kind of had a heads up. You knew something was wrong. But like you said, with your stepdad, it was, just sudden and now you have to deal with all this other bullshit on top of it.
Yeah. I will say the state of Connecticut has made probate pretty accessible.
I'll
give them that.
Okay.
It was very easy for me to go on the website and see exactly what I needed.
Okay.
If I had questions, I was able to call the probate court and say, hey, like I'm doing this by myself. I just want to make sure that I have this right. And I would have the dates of like, I had, I made this like 11 tab spreadsheet, making sure that I had all of the account information, what days I needed to have certain things handed in by, all different kinds of things. But they do make it easy for things that aren't super complex. So like our situation was a little bit more complex, which is why I wanted the attorney. But
right.
I'm very lucky we didn't have any sort of crazy family dynamic. Myself, my brother, and my stepbrother were all on the same page. Like if there is any money, like it's going to the kids. Like, I just want to make sure like we don't owe anybody money. Like that's
sure,
that was
absolutely.
like he still had a massive mortgage on the house and like all of these bills. But I just wanted to make sure like they got paid on time. And You know, it was like I was running his household, even though he wasn't here, and also running mine.
Right.
So I will give the state of Connecticut, you know, that as far as that being pretty cut and dry, like knowing what forms you need. They made the process pretty easy. Again, like the whole intestacy thing is very difficult if you have those challenges with family. But if you don't have those kind of challenges or don't anticipate them, I guess it's not so bad. But again, a will would have been great, you know, knowing like that's kind of like my plan. Like, okay, when I kick it, here's my will, here's my lawyer. Like, these are where this is like my 401k, this is my life insurance, this is my bank, these are my savings accounts, like whatever, you know?
Right.
But I never would have thought about that before. So yeah, it was definitely a lesson. Like my mother-in-law started after, you know, we told her, because it took us several months to clean out the house before I finally caved in and hired someone. Because we didn't know what the financial situation was. And at the time, I'm like, I really don't want to be tied down with a financial burden associated 100%. With the house.
Sure.
You know, so it cost us $1,000 alone just to get a dumpster. And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to have to do that, you know. And we took out literally 2 tons of garbage before I caved in. I was like, we got to hire someone. Like, I can't do this anymore.
Right. Well, and you know, it's also that wasn't something that I ever thought about either. Because again, yes, I'm single. I don't have any children, but you know, I've got both my mom and my sister as my beneficiaries. But it's one of those that's like, heaven forbid either of them go before me. Okay, then what? Now I'm 100% alone and could potentially have just money lying around. I want somebody to do something with it. It's got to go somewhere. It's got to, you know, I want it to benefit someone. So that's giving me pause. It's making me think like, oh shit, maybe I should attach a third name to that and figure it out. So yeah, I hadn't thought in those terms either. Wow. Man.
Yeah, it's definitely a learning thing.
Yeah.
You know, and you think like, oh, I'm not rich, or, oh, like I don't have anything. Like, no, like you actually don't realize, especially if you own any sort of property, no matter how big or small it is, like you have assets. Yeah. And I think it's important for women too. Like we definitely have to kind of be mindful about, you know, if for some reason you get an inheritance of some kind, like protecting that inheritance, because it's not a marital asset in the state of Connecticut. But even if like, so like right now you're single, if you got married and they moved into your condo, after a while that becomes a marital asset, even though you own it. So it's crazy how much it changes by state.
Well, that's another reason to stay single, gang.
All you single ladies, like just be prepared. Do your homework first.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild. Like the amount of like legal loopholes that exist, especially about property. So I would definitely make sure everybody protect your assets.
Well, and again, it varies state to state. So what you're hearing from Sarah's story may not actually apply. What you hear from a coworker, from a friend, from a relative may not suit where you're living, what your status is, your marital status, even your financial status. It's all dependent on the individual state laws, which is wild, but also for a reason in some states. So I again, not to completely go off, but I just heard a story on my radio program about there's David Geffen, billionaire. He is divorcing his husband. They've been together for less than 2 years, but in the state of California, the way I don't know if you would even call it alimony, but yes. So basically, he has to pay out 50%. They had no prenup, I will say. So he at the very least, he has to pay out for 50% of the marriage. So they were married less than 2 years, so he only has to pay out for a year. But so if they were married for 50, he would have to be paying alimony for 25 years. And, you know, they're speculating on the show. They said, well, what does that mean though? Like, how do they calculate the amount? And they said, well, is it based on like the lifestyle he was living as they were married? Is it some percentage of his overall income that, you know, it's so, again, it can be so nuanced if you don't have certain protections in place. I personally have no problem with a prenup. I think a prenup is a great idea, regardless of where you are, where your income status lies. Yeah. Just again, like you said, to protect yourself yourself ahead of time, because anything could happen. Even if, again, even if you don't get a divorce, if the person just suddenly passes away and all of a sudden, who knows what familiar connections they have, that their people are going to come in and try to take half your shit. You want to have those, at least the bare minimum protections in place to.
Absolutely. I think people look at prenup like a bad word, and it's really like,
well, and again, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to think, and because you're thinking about the future, right? And at no point does anybody prepare. Like, I'm marrying you. I'm marrying you for a reason. I want to be with you forever. Right. I want to have a family with you. We have goals. We have things that we want to aspire to. Nothing on that list is divorce. Right. So it's a hard conversation to have, because I don't want to divorce you. That's the reason I propose. I want to be with you forever. And it's like, yeah, but you also have to live in the real world, gang. Like,
exactly.
Like, I might get sick of you in 5 years, and what are you going to do?
I mean, we talk about, so my husband and I have been married for 13 years this year. I can't believe it. And, as we've gotten older and, whatever, like, I bought my first house. I'm probably going to buy a second one in the next year, talking about like all of these different things. I'm like, we married each other when we were broke as hell.
Yeah.
And now, so it's like, okay, so now we have to think about like, okay, if he buys a house, like, should I go on it? Like, and they're conversations that we're having with no indicate, like, we don't have any sort of intention of divorcing or anything, right. But realistically speaking, like, okay, like, if something, God forbid, happens, like, how do we protect ourselves? You know, like, he saw me go through everything with my parents, and he was my right hand through the whole thing. Like, I could not have gotten through it without him. And he learned a lot too. So it's like, okay, like, I have to make sure his name is on everything.
Right.
He has to make sure my name is on everything. And like, if we have God forbid, a horrible divorce 5 years down the road, like, I guess we're going to have everything. Cause like, that's just, it is what it is. But before it was like, I was so hyper focused on like, okay, I have a daughter. That is my next of kin, is my daughter. But no, it's technically your spouse. So you can think technically all you want, but in the eyes of the law, like, your spouse is your next of kin,
right? Unless
you have a prenup.
Well, and again, like you said, even if you make things, everything is equal in your marriage and you share everything, if it's not equal on the documentation, one of you will still have rights that that does not have, no matter what happens. Especially,
I think it varies by state too.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Right.
Mm-hmm. It's scary.
It's a lot.
It's really scary.
It's a lot, gang. And again, it's great that we all have friends and family that we can lean on, but like I said, we all are going to have different experiences, especially given where we live, especially given our income and that kind of thing. So what the bottom line is, know what the rules are in your state, know what the rules are in your particular country where you're living, if you're living outside the United States, because it's something happens and now all of a sudden you're thrown into this, and it's not like you can sit on it for years and years and I'll get to it when I get my shit together. It's like some of this stuff is time sensitive and needs to happen, or you're just going to lose out. So again, Sarah, that's why I brought you on, to have these difficult conversations, to share. And I really thank you so much for opening up and sharing, because it's a hard conversation to have. It's a hard reality to accept. It's hard to go back to once you've gone through it. So I do want to thank you so much for sharing and providing just a little bit of insight and education for my listeners. We'll definitely have you back, because again, we've got more to talk about for sure. Yes. But you guys, this was Sarah, and as always, I'm Elizabeth Marvel. Thank you so much for listening to Try Not to Curse, and we will check you next time.